Well, we're headed toward Garage Mahal, but that's not actually what we're showing you this week.
No.
We're doing a retrospective on Al's scratch-built freight cars.
Wow.
And if you follow the channel, you know that we're just coming up on 2 years ago. Wow, that he passed away.
Right.
And he had just finished his 98th freight car, and we were planning to do a whole retrospective on the first 100 cars when he finished number 100. And I'd started shooting that, and then he passed away.
Yeah, that didn't
and
quite
I
happen.
haven't had the heart to do anything with it. So this, for the next 2 weeks, we're showing you guys that footage. So
Right.
these are some of, not very many of, the 100 scratch-built freight cars, the almost 100, the 98 that Al built before he passed away. Check it out.
Wow, what a neat box car.
Isn't that neat? It's East Coast, Wiscasset and Quebec, something like that.
Something like
something
that.
like that. It's 2-foot gauge.
Oh.
O scale. Most of the cars Al built, he built in O scale. Sometimes not, but generally speaking, O scale. And then all gauges, 2-foot, 3-foot, 30-inch, standard gauge, you name it, he did it.
They look real though. Look at that.
Isn't that beautiful? And it's all scratch built, mostly out of plastic. Now, Al had a whole process that he followed for building these. And next week, we're going to let Al explain his process. He presented his cars to the local meeting of the NMRA and explained how he built them.
Right.
And so that'll be next week's show. But let's just look over. I wish I'd have photographed all his cars, but, well, I had no idea that he was going to pass away.
And yeah, it was a complete surprise.
But Steve has most of them, so I talked to Steve, and I think we're going to go down there and try to photograph all the ones that I didn't photograph.
I do two things, right? I play the meanest jazz clarinet you'll ever hear, and I build cars, right?
So this is Al's workbench. It's just an old desk.
Right.
But he built 98 just brilliant scratch-built cars here at this funny little desk. He used very few tools.
Right. Most of them were homemade.
Homemade tools and an X-Acto number 11 blade, and that was about it.
Right.
And from that came all these just brilliant, beautiful pieces of rolling stock. Now, what Al seemed to be best known for were his pine trees.
Right. He made some of the best I've ever seen.
Well, he'd do all of those clinics at the NMRA, and everybody knew about Al and his pine trees. Maybe not so much about his rolling stock models, but boy, they're just amazing. We did this video with him years ago where he actually put his workshop on video, and it's great that we've got that.
Exactly.
If you're careful about it, the dead stuff at the bottom of the tree is really more interesting than the live stuff at the top.
Now, Al never had a railroad of his own. We built a couple of different modular railroads, and this was our big club layout that we had for a while, the MRS railroad. But it's kind of sad that he never actually had a railroad of his own. And check that out.
That looks so real.
Doesn't that? This is the Winters store. I think it's in Maine. So he also built some scratch-built structures, quite a few scratch-built structures. It wasn't all just rolling stock and pine trees. But the Winters store, I think, was maybe the best structure he ever built.
No kidding.
Is that just beautiful or what? And you get it in just the right light, and you'd swear you're looking at a real building.
Oh, I think I am.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, what? Yeah, no, that's just a model. You can tell because there's David's truck over to the
There it is.
over to the left. That kind of gives it away. But is that amazing? 2-foot gauge again. He liked to do a lot of Maine 2-foot gauge stuff. A lot of stuff off of the Sandy River and Rangeley Lake, something like that. But here we have one of his freight cars, and you can kind of tell the process, how he built these, just by looking at this one that's unpainted.
Right.
It's all made out of styrene plastic, or mostly made out of styrene plastic. Here's another one. Again, you can see that it's evergreen plastic, And he would follow prototype cars for the most part. He freelanced a few, but he would find plans for these cars, really old cars. He preferred real early 19th century cars. And then he'd just start cobbling them together out of evergreen plastic.
Well, that's neat.
Isn't that neat? And then once they're painted, you'd swear they're wood. But of course, he'd put in all of the undercarriage detail here, the Westinghouse brake system and all of that sort of thing.
Where did he get the little cylinder?
Well, these are mostly Grant Line castings, a few other brands as well, but there's a lot of detail parts that you can just buy.
Well, that's neat.
So that way he didn't have to scratch build those. Now look at this. This is very interesting on this car. It's got 2 doors and 1 opening. And if you're moving cattle, you can slide the vented door over the opening. If you're moving freight, you can close that in with the solid door.
Just don't combine the two.
Just don't combine the two. And here we can see the stain that he would put on. He always called it a stain, but it's a Flowcool paint, but it looks like a wood stain, and it really makes the plastic look like wood once he gets that stain, if you will, onto the white plastic. Now he had a way of distressing the plastic too, so that it really did look like wood.
Oh, I'll say.
He'd just drag a razor saw across it to put a grain in there and then kind of distress the edges and so on. But doesn't that look like wood?
No kidding.
You'd never guess that's styrene plastic. Now here's another car, a very interesting car. This is a car that never existed.
Oh,
The Tiffany Car Company designed this as an ice reefer. They were kind of inventing that concept. And this is the car that they designed for their patent. And then they realized putting the ice in an overhead bunker like that was going to make a big sloppy mess inside the car.
I would imagine.
So they never built it. But they did get the patent for the iced reefer using this car. So Al thought, I'm going to build it. And he went ahead and he put in the ice bunker across the top of the car, since he doesn't have to worry about the ice melting and make a big mess inside. Isn't that neat that he went ahead and built a car that never actually existed just from the patent drawings? Now notice on the roof over to the right that there's a great big huge metal tray to hold the ice.
Oh my.
And to catch the water, so when it melts it doesn't go all over the place. But without a drain, it's still going to go all over the place. Now this cattle car is unique in a way in that it actually is wood.
Oh.
Well, he built it out of plastic first, and if you make really thin strips of plastic like this, well, they warped. And it didn't
I
look
would
good.
imagine, yeah.
So, the bottom, the running gear is still plastic, but then all of the superstructure above, he actually built out of wood. And that way it's much more dimensionally stable, and then he still went ahead and built a plastic roof for the whole thing.
There you go.
And you can't tell because of the way he distresses his plastic and so on. You really can't tell what's plastic and what's wood. It all looks like wood.
It does.
And speaking of wood, remember when Al went through his pickle car phase?
I couldn't figure that out.
He just one day fell in love with pickle and vinegar cars and decided he was going to build 6 of them, 3 pickle cars and 3 vinegar cars. This is the one he built for himself. He built a pair of cars for himself in standard gauge, a pair of cars for Steve in 3-foot gauge, and a pair of cars for Don, also in 3-foot gauge. So there's 6 of them out there.
Oh my, Peter Piper picked a peck of pickled peppers.
Yes. And he had to put these little arrows on the tanks because, as it turned out, they would only fit in there one way. They were kind of keyed. So he put these little arrows so that he could set it together like that. But isn't that neat, the way that goes together? Now, this is one of the cars he built for Don. He called Don's the Pickleville Pickle Company.
Pickleville.
Well, my uncle had that summer house at Pickleville on Bear Lake.
Pickleville?
Pickleville. So Al picked up on that, and he made the Pickleville Pickle Company for Don.
Yeah, I think you're pickled.
And this is the Tabiona Pickle Company because Steve calls his port city Tabiona. So he built, in this case, he built the whole pickle plant. The Tabiona Pickle Company with a vinegar car and a pickle car. Isn't that neat?
That is cool.
Now, his own car, which was standard gauge, had openable doors, and he actually put pickles in there.
Oh, you're kidding me.
Well, he modeled little pickles in there, and then when he entered it in a contest, he put a little drop of vinegar in there so that when the judges opened the door, it actually smelled of pickles.
What a deal.
What a deal. But check out the way he did the salt staining and the weird staining from the spilled vinegar and stuff. That just looks so good.
It does. It looks like I wouldn't want to touch it, but it looks great.
And it actually stinks. So there's that. Now here's one of the vinegar cars. He built 2 different prototypes, but this is the one that went on to Steve's railroad in a 3-foot gauge, and they use a horizontal tank, and they just haul vinegar. But I got some pictures before he painted it and put it all together, so you could kind of see how that works. And then here's the same car once it was all painted and put together.
That is just completely, I want to say nuts, but it's cool.
Isn't that beautiful? Just, you know, and so at the Pickle Company, the vinegar car and the pickle car are tied up at the siding. But here again, full undercarriage detail. And in the category of unusual, check this out.
A 3-pot hopper?
Remember when we photographed the 3-pot hopper in Baltimore?
Exactly.
That was so that Al and Don could model this thing. So Don designed the pots on his computer, printed those on his 3D printer. He did the pattern work for those really weird wheel trucks and sent those off to precision scale for brass casting. And then Al built the whole frame and support structure and put the whole thing together and painted it.
That's cool.
Isn't that neat? Now, in this case, the frame hasn't been painted yet. Only the pots have been painted. Now, here we have a Union tank line tank car, oil car. And interestingly, I thought that he would have used telescoping tubes, but he couldn't get those in the correct size, so he made his own.
That figures.
That figures, doesn't it? So he found a way to roll those out of sheet plastic, and then, of course, the rivets are just little detail pieces. And, of course, as usual, full undercage, underframe,
Underframe.
details going on. And here's another one of his 2-foot gauge cars off the Sandy River and Rangeley Lakes. It's a combine. It's sort of a caboose chair car.
I love this one.
Isn't that? It's one of the neatest cars, and it's so knobby because being a 2-foot gauge, it's just a really narrow little car. Now, Al always made his passenger car roofs removable and full interior details, and this one's no exception. So we can see how the caboose end of the car works, and the stove, and then the entire chair car part. And then he scratch built his own marker lights as well.
Those are cool.
That's just neat. He just liked building them. There are ones available. Now here we have the Sebasticook and Moosehead Railroad. That was his standard gauge railroad, again, East Coast. And this is a Sebasticook and Moosehead caboose.
That's pretty. I like it.
Isn't that neat? It's just got really great lines. I love
does.
the proportions of it. And it's got freight doors on it as well. Now, pay a very close attention to those mattresses because you're going to have to build a set of those.
Exactly. And he was after me to get that done.
And he was showing us those, saying this is how they look, and you're going to have to model them, and you're going to have to do it in a larger scale, but there they are. So.
Right.
And then it's got the classic bead and board green siding on the inside. But just a gorgeous, gorgeous little caboose and accurate right down to the latches on the doors. Here's an unusual car. Again, the standard gauge Sebasticook and Moosehead Railroad. This is the milk car.
Oh.
But interestingly, the milk car that they ran on that railroad also had a post office in it.
Oh, really?
A combine car. Everything serves 2 purposes. Again, that's a standard gauge railroad, so we've got the standard gauge running gear. But here over to the right, you can see the post office. But notice that it's all milk racks inside, and the ice bunker's just that tiny little thing, and there's one little ice hatch in the roof to fill up that one small space with ice. And here's a Sebasticook and Moosehead. It's a baggage express chair combine.
Oh, my.
3 purposes, all in one car this way. So most of the car is chair car, but it also has a post office and a baggage area.
Spitting prohibited by law of the state?
I guess they don't care for spitting in Maine.
I guess not.
Here you can see the post office, a little teeny tiny walled off section for security. And look at this, it's got the full bathroom as well.
Thank goodness.
Thank goodness, because,
Yeah,
when
I know.
When you gotta go, you gotta go. Now look at these gorgeous lights. These, I don't think you'd call them a chandelier, but the overhead lighting. Is that gorgeous?
They're
or
beautiful.
what? Now he was getting those from someone, and I don't know exactly who, and I don't know exactly where, but they're brass and they're just plain gorgeous. And while a lot of this car, again, looks like it's wood, it's not. It's all plastic. Now, everything we've seen so far is a model of a prototype. This was a Freelance car,
Oh, really?
ON30. And so he wanted to do some Freelance cars for ON30. And this is for the Shoehorn Gorge 30-inch gauge railroad. And all that stuff he just made up, invented off the top of his head. And isn't that neat?
That is just completely, oh, man.
It's just gorgeous.
What?
And it
Yeah.
all looks so fun coming down the 30-inch gauge. Typical construction, it's still all plastic, and it has the removable roof and the interior and everything. Now this car has a full post office inside it, even though the car is tiny. And look how nice that post office turned out.
It looks real.
And Al was so proud of those mail bags. He really researched the giant mail bags that they would use, and those have accurate latches and catches, and accurate right down to the lettering on the bags. Now this is a great car. He built this car expressly for the National NMRA convention in Long Beach in about 1996, something like that.
Wow.
And he went off to Long Beach hell-bent on getting best of show, and Don showed up with his drop bottom gone and beat him.
Oh, no.
And Don's was 124 points out of 125, and this was only like 120. So Don beat him. But what an absolutely gorgeous, gorgeous car that he built for the national show. Now here again, it's a prototype car. He had all of the plans of the original car. Now check out those overhead luggage racks.
How in the world did he make those?
Well, Don made them.
Don made them.
He designed them on his computer, and then he sent the files off for photo etch, and then they fold up just like those Metal Earth models that you like so much.
Oh, my goodness.
And didn't those, they're just amazing.
They
They're
are.
just stunning. Now, unfortunately, the photograph doesn't do it justice, but the wood graining on the paneling inside is just stunning. And it's just, again, a sheet styrene, and then Al put down a base coat, chalk, and then a clear coat over the whole thing to make it look like highly polished wood. It just looks amazing. Here again, he used that same light fixture from the other car,
Those are beautiful.
and they're just gorgeous. Just absolutely stunning. Now the interior of that car looks so much like wood that he did win the award for Best Wood Car.
Oh, really?
Yes, at the National Convention, but the only wood anywhere in the car are those planks that Goofy's standing on.
Oh, dear.
So that's the Goofy secret of this car, that it won Best Wood Car when it's actually made entirely out of plastic, except for that little piece of wood that Goofy's standing on. But check out that door frame, the rounded door frame.
I know. That makes it look really authentic.
It's just, and it's all built out of strip styrene. And Al built a few locomotives.
He did.
Not from scratch. This is actually a River Rossi 440, and then he just redressed it.
And a nice job.
And a nice job he did on it too. But he custom built, scratch built a whole bunch of detail parts for it, so that it would fit his vision of what a 440 should look like. So he scratch built the cab and the domes and the stack and the headlight and the marker lights and so on and so forth, and of course the coal load.
Right.
Al was going for all of the NMRA certificates so he could get his Master Modeler Award. And he completed all the certificates except one.
Oh.
He was working on the author certificate when he passed away. And here we have the very last car that he built, number 98. And it turned out to be one of the most complicated cars.
It looks complicated.
It's also one of the most gorgeous cars that he ever did. Just turned out so neat. And he just barely got the paint on this. Maybe, I don't know, 3 or 4 days, something like that, before he passed away. Typical Al construction, but just all this gorgeous detail. I think it's just maybe the best car that he ever built. And as it turns out, the very last car that he ever built. A lot of the finer details are brass, just for strength. The decals are dry transfer.
Wow.
He'd just do those one letter at a time using dry transfer decals. That was his preferred system of doing lettering on all of his cars. Here we can see the tank along with the prototype drawings of the original car. It's a tapered tank that tapers down toward the center of the car, and then you've got that drain right there at the very center of the car. But just as he'd done with his other tank cars, he rolled his own tank sections, but these have to be tapered so that they telescope inside of each other. And that turned out to be just enormously difficult. And look at all the beautiful brass work on the undercarriage. I am so glad I got these pictures of this car under construction. Al, you done good.
No kidding.
He really pulled this one off. So anyway, there's the pictures of a lot of the freight cars.
Wow.
But next week, we're actually going to have Al explaining the whole thing. Because I shot that video before he passed away.
Right.
So anyway, that's next week's show. Okay. Well, if you haven't been over to the channel, do pop on over to the channel. And if you're not a subscriber, you know the drill. You can subscribe right now with that blue button. Are we ready for it? The blue button right there. Well, we're not sure how you found this video on the internet. We hope you didn't find it boring. And we will see you here next week with the other half of the show.
Yeah, it's down there somewhere.
It was a steep hill back then.
I hate that hill.
We'll see you later. Bye-bye.
Bye.